Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to just start going over, introduce some of the paint tools in Mudbox. I like to use this especially for like inorganic, or I'm sorry, organic, like creature type things, especially whenever I'm, if I've got like my frog guy that I've been kind of using in some of my past tutorials, instead of just slapping like textures on certain parts of geometry, it's just easier just to paint the entire creature at once. Or really for any kind of material that you want to kind of start using your paintbrush. And the reason is because a lot of people that are doing this kind of stuff like are really familiar with Photoshop in general, how to use the brush and everything. And you may have explored in Maya the actual paint tools in there, which are, somewhat limited. You can do it, but then there's a whole conversion thing of making sure the images are converted to UV or a UV map, so like a JPEG or a TIFF map, so you can add, or a TIFF image, so you can add it back in, like in the there's the 3D paint tool. Yeah, the 3D paint tool, which allows you to kind of start painting on the object. I just think it's a lot easier to take it over into Mudbox, or like in my future tutorial, I'll show you the new Substance Painter. That's pretty cool too. But Mudbox and Maya work hand in hand, so sometimes it's a little easier to update stuff in there. So, but the biggest thing you got to understand when you're taking it into Mudbox, especially if you're taking it from Maya, is this UV map set basically. So in other words, this is that sphere filleted out in the 2D image, and this is basically how Mudbox reads that the paint is running across the actual image itself. Because given this, if I were to take this texture map back into Maya, it's only going to send really this texture map as is, as a UV 2D layer, and send back into Maya to put it back on. So in other words, my UV map layer here, which it's all a mess. You ought to probably just put an automatic on there real quick. Now you have like your 2D images basically layered out here. It would bring it back in there, thus wrapping it around the model there. Now, if you are just straight up working in Mudbox, you don't really need to worry about it so much because it basically generates UVs for you whenever you bring it in there. Like if I just drop this sphere in there, it automatically created. Don't save this. And let's drop this man's head back in here. Here's your paint, your sculpt tools are down here. Here's your paint tools. They kind of look familiar to Photoshop. You've got like your dodge, your burn, your erase tools, your blur tools. The biggest one you're probably going to worry about is your paintbrush and your fall off. How you can kind of make it hard edges or not. Your colors are going to be over here. How you want to select your color. You can pull in from any kind of eyedropper. You can also use these stamped images actually too, to kind of give it that that look, that's how you're painting in general. So first of all, I don't need to make any UVs for this. This guy's already got some. But one thing you wanted to look at is you're used to your sculpt layers over here now with your divisions and everything. Your paint layers work the same way as you've got like a whole shelf over here now. You want to start creating paint layers, and they can kind of work one on top of each other. You can kind of like adjust visibility and stuff like that, the same way you did with the sculpt layers. So if you just clicked on there, create a new layer, it's going to say create a new paint layer. It's a TIFF image. It's a diffuse channel. You can create like glossy channels and everything else, but probably for your base layer, it's going to be diffuse. So yeah, let's do it. So now you have a paint layer. I have a color selected. I have a paintbrush selected, and it works the same way as the sculpting tools with the strength and everything. I want to lower it down some. Now you can just start painting around, and you'll see it kind of paints down there, there. This mouse, sometimes in this program, it's really finicky. You see the way it'll kind of encompass the entire thing. let's say if I adjust my fall off to another, now I notice I got like a little bit of blur on there. So if I switch to another color, let me add another paint layer. Let's go pink. That you can adjust the strength between the two. Let's look at these stamps. These are always fun. You can actually bring these stamp images in if you wanted to, but I'm just going to create another paint layer up here, and I'm going to use a stamp image. I'm going to use this rock stamp image. Still on this pink, I'm going to use like a dark blue. So you see the way I can kind of get that stamp image, which really works for like a lot of texturing. Like if your guy's kind of got like a scaly skin back, you know, sometimes it works. You can see all those little scales. I probably need to turn it up a little higher on the fall off. The material presets, I don't really ever mess with these. These are kind of just like the base of how it will look. I usually just stick with the stamps and the colors, the basic colors of them, and the fall off, whatever your how hard you want your. And I'm just messing around now. Let's get back to a harder brush. So therefore, you have your object that you can kind of texture up how you want it. Hopefully, maybe you've extracted that UV map to kind of give it that detail. But it looks really good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually close this out, and I'll show you how to bring in like a Maya file, which is usually what I end up doing. Now you can bring in object by object. You can combine this thing however you want to do it, but the biggest thing is to make sure that your UV maps are somewhat laid out in a nice fashion to where Maya can, or Mudbox can start reading them to paint on them. Now my guy I know has some issues simply because I use simple spheres for his eyes. So if I bring the eyeballs in, it's going to tell me an error like, you've got too many vertexes connected to this one vertex, too many edges are running. That's why I kind of am against triangles and spheres to begin with sometimes, because it's always problematic when it comes to UV mapping. But I'm going to be painting, what I actually would be doing was I would be bringing this guy back into Maya and just having the sphere, this ball here, one single color, in other words. So I don't really necessarily need to actually take the eyeballs in there, but I do want to take the eyelids in there and the teeth in there. Well, I don't know, let me separate this. It might be a little easier. So I have this. I want to make these two objects part of my shell. I'm going to combine all this thing together. So I am going to look at the UV editor on it. It's not too bad. This is the automatic mapping. You can go and you can separate these things out the layout. But as long as like Mudbox can read where everything's going to have a nice clean, the way it was painting on there, it's going to be able to paint on there pretty nice. It probably will give me an error, but I'm just going to say yes to it and just deal with it. So I have this object selected. You can import multiple objects, actually, if they were all separated, and it would show you up there in your object list of Mudbox all the different separate objects. But I'm just not even going to worry about the eyes and the teeth. They were going to be one solid color. I was going to use material in Maya on them. So I'm just going to go up here to File, Send to Mudbox, Send as a new scene. Command mode failed. It's opening up though. It's connecting to Mudbox. It would have been easier if I would have just opened up Maya, but I had that other file in there. Alright. So probably what I should have did is went ahead and mesh smoothed it over, but I think it's going to be okay like this, because what I'll do is I'll just go up here to my sculpt and I'll add a layer, and then I'll add new subdivision levels to go back to my paint. So I'm going to add a paint layer. And now it's just kind of the same thing I was doing earlier with that guy. It's set my brush. Dark green. I want to reset the brush, the fall off. Let's go to the stamp image right here. Let's figure out why. Let me just reset my brush real quick. Okay, I just deleted that layer and started over again, which I'll do that right now. Just delete this layer. I went to, you could actually kind of flood the whole thing if you wanted to. New layer. Just cover the entire model basically. But if you notice, it didn't do these eyelids up here. That's because it wasn't directed to it. See, now if I would have brought in different objects, the good one thing about Mudbox, it works the same kind of as the outliner in Maya in terms of like you can hide material. So if I'd have brought in the eyeballs to texture them, I could actually just turn them off like this, because it would have just labeled them, you know, eyeball. I would have had them labeled basically eyeballs and kind of brought them up, and I could have just turned them off and painted the body, then brought it back in. But I'm not really gonna do that. So, but this will paint on the eyelids. It just kind of, it separates the UV maps in terms of, it kind of reads it differently because it knows it wasn't connected there with the UV map. So, which is kind of good. You can kind of give it like maybe a different color, like a lighter color, kind of paint over those. There we go. Versus on a hard, the square one, so it's kind of. So now maybe I want to add another paint layer in there. And I'm going to go with this like stamp, this green stamp right here, but I'm going to turn the turn my brush down a little bit. See what that looks like. There you go. fall off, strength down, so where it doesn't really cover it. Now it's got like this gritty. You know, and obviously if he was sculpted a little bit more, I could do some with that, but I'm not really worried about it. Give him some of these stripes in here. I'll color these different. Some black stripes. Dark. I want to add these to another layer. I'll turn the strength down, kind of. Like he got run over. I would think he would have kind of a yellow belly. So I'm going to add another layer. And we'll take the stamp image off. I'll turn this just to a bright yellow so I know. I'm going to go to my fall off. A bright little kind of faded in. You can go take the eraser and kind of erase up here, just on that layer. So I'm going to go back to the stripes and kind of turn them down. Yeah, so it's looking pretty good. So I have my basic colors, I have my stripes in there. I'm going to save this scene so I don't lose this thing. Frogman. We'll call him Billy because I've made a few Frogmans. Now, if I just send it back to Maya, I could update the current scene. I could send selected as a new scene. Then I have to select it, but I'm just going to update the current scene. Nothing is selected. Okay. Let me just select them. Update current scene. Send base meshes instead. Send meshes at current level. That's what I'm going to do. I didn't really change my base mesh level. No, I did actually. I smoothed them over, so I want this smooth level in the new scene. Send meshes. It's going to give me a default path of where you want like the actual images and stuff. So you could name these frog textures or frog. Okay. Actually, what happens if I select as send selected as a new scene? Update textures in current scene. Let's try that. Stick this box here. Okay, I was selecting the wrong one. So you have the item selected, the model. Send to Maya, send select as new scene. We'll just try this. Send meshes at current level. I sent my path to the desktop. It would be to the folder basically where you had your source images of your project file though. So okay, it's going to reopen this scene up basically, or import this with a new scene. So I don't want to save this. So now it's brought this guy in here, and if you hit 6, you should be able to see in the viewport the new UV maps are applied to it. And if you bring up your hypershader, it's brought in a new Lambert and it's applied those textures to that Lambert basically the same way as the way the textures are on the actual UV maps that you painted on there. It looks pretty good. Now I'd have to bring in my teeth and my eyeballs from the other one, but that's no problem. Just add those in there, and I'd probably add new spheres in there. Yeah, that's the way you can kind of import them back and forth. I mean, it looks really good instead of having to like make a bunch of different images in Photoshop and bring them over. It's just a really fun way to start learning how to just utilize that paint material in Mudbox here. Deselect model. And there's many other options here. Like I said, it's fun to play with these things. Use the stamp image to get those shapes and stuff down. You can import stamps. So in other words, if you have like a hairy type creature, you can import like a PNG. Yeah, to upload one and kind of use your own images basically to do that. But you can get a lot of good stuff by using the stamp spacing, and this works kind of just like the way we were sculpting too. So it's just good to kind of keep your paint in layers. That way you can kind of bounce back and forth between each one and or adjust visibility between them. So think in terms of Photoshop, how you could kind of do that, and then just importing them back into Maya. Just like I said, the biggest thing is you need to have a clean UV going into Mudbox if you're taking it from Maya, and knowing where those UVs are sent to when you're brought back, because they're basically sent to that path wherever you sent them to. I sent them to my desktop, which I'll show you. And now I have this source image basically, and this needs to be in your source image of your Maya project folder, or at least be to where it will upload every time you switch to another computer or something. So kind of crash course in UVs, understanding what they are. But I think in terms of painting, there's really, you don't really have to worry about a lot of cutting them up. Just make sure that they're laid out great, and you're not getting a lot of crazy UV overlapping, because whenever you go to painting, it may be problematic in Mudbox. So, okay, well, thanks for watching.